Hey. How y'all doing? I have to say, this is intimidating. You are an incredible group of people. I am going to be the dumbest person in the room tonight. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. That'll be me. Yeah. You represent 90 countries, which means I think most of you don't know who the heck I am. That's fine. Check out YouTube. I am not the star tonight, of course. I'm just here to moderate. And I'm here to welcome now President Bill Clinton. Let's get him out here. Ladies and gentlemen. How are you?
Good. Where am I sitting? Here?
Yeah, have a seat right here. This is the most boring talk show set I've ever seen in my life. Thank you so much for being here. This is such an impressive group of young people. I want to say on a personal note, when President Clinton was in office, he was kind enough to invite me to the White House many times, which was the thrill of a lifetime. So thank you very much for that. Never invited under President Bush. Obama, I just snuck in a few times. But I do have a personal interest in the Clinton Global Initiative. I have two children. I have a 12-year-old daughter and I have a 10-year-old son, and increasingly, I'm more and more concerned about the world that they're going to inherit. And so I very much appreciate that this is about action. This is about taking action, getting the job done, and solving problems in a practical way. The first question I wanted to ask is, this is a very unusual group of young people, as you know. They are highly intelligent, they are motivated, but like a lot of highly intelligent, motivated young people, they are also ambitious by nature. How do you get them to balance that ambition, that drive to accomplish things in their personal life with their desire to maybe achieve things, for the initiative?
They deserve all the credit for that.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are in schools that promote community service and kind of entrepreneurial ideas to solve problems. But, I find that more than any generation I've ever seen, I grew up in the 60s. We were activists. We were for civil rights. Generally, we wanted to get rid of the war in Vietnam. We wanted to reduce poverty. But we thought the way we should be activists is to, protest, elect, expect the government to do it. We live in a time now where the greatest good news stories of the last 25 years is the rise of citizen activism to actually make positive change. And what we know is it works best when you get different groups of people with different skills to work in creative teams, and it's even better if they work in partnership with business and with government. So it's incredibly empowering, but they deserve all the credit. They're motivated to do it. What we try to do is bring people together so that they can discuss their different ideas and come up with commitments that really have a chance to change the future. And a number of them have, and a number of them will. We're at Cal Berkeley. The university students here committed to do more in the significant refugee population over in Oakland, to try to develop STEM education, to try to develop their ability to use the internet in a positive way and prepare them not only educationally, but to find useful employment and solve a lot of their other problems. Another one was interested in recycling. That sounds like second nature in Northern California, but their hook was, in order for this to ever take, we got to figure out a way for it to become a profitable, sustainable business. And so it really should be a gold mine if you do it right. That's just two commitments from one school, but you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Most of these young people want their lives to have some meaning beyond doing well in school and beyond doing well in their own careers.
What I'm interested in is, you said a quote. You said you thought this generation, I'm talking about the generation of young men and women right here, right now, is the most poised of any generation, in your opinion, you've seen to make real change. Now, you've lived through a few generations. There's Gen X, that's not a knock. I have too. We both have. But you've deemed this generation to be the one that you think is most poised. Why? Why do you think that?
Because they ask the how question more. And because they live in the most interdependent, connected time in history, and because they're the most comfortable with our diversity in all of its manifestations. I mean, look at this crowd. they're most comfortable. As a nation, we're less sexist, racist, and homophobic than we used to be. But they really, really have been on the cutting edge of all these movements. And they find diversity stimulating and monotony boring. And the only thing they have to resist is America's last remaining bigotry. We just don't seem to want to be around anybody who disagrees with us anymore, which seems to be a problem right across the political spectrum. So they get in here and they have these constructive disagreements and arguments and trying to find ideas because they're focused on ultimately making a decision and making a difference in other people's lives in whatever way they choose. And it's incredibly empowering to know that you don't have to be, quote, in power to do something that improves the future.
Now, obviously, this is a heady experience. They're here, they're in this room right now, and this is palpably exciting. How do you get them to perpetuate this when they leave this environment? And this has got to be a lot of fun and invigorating. They leave this environment and they go out into their communities or they go out in the globe. How do you get them to take the energy that they have here and really maintain that sense of commitment?
Well, first of all, one of the purposes of asking them to come here is to re-energize them. They got here because they were already doing things. Mm-hmm. These students all applied to come here. And there's no admission charge. Those who can afford it have to pay their expenses, and otherwise we raise a fund to try to bring people here from all over the world and from all over the country and all income groups so that it's not a barrier. But most of them get jazzed enough meeting other people that when they go home, they have even more intense interest in doing this than they did when they came here. That's the whole purpose of having this meeting. And also, they've all got a job to do now because they said, usually not individuals, usually significant numbers of people make a commitment to do something, and then they don't want to be the one group that didn't do it.
Right.
Or at least get caught trying.
Right.
And that's the other thing we try to...
So we'll shame you if you don't do what you're supposed to do.
No shaming, but I'm going to give you...
I'll shame you, not you. I will shame you.
We started this a couple of years before I started CGIU with the Clinton Global Initiative. And we did it just basically because I thought it was frustrating to keep going to these really interesting meetings around the world and having all these brilliant people talk about all these problems, and nobody ever had to do anything about it.
Right.
So I had this crazy idea that if you had a meeting and you said, look, the real price of entry is you got to commit to do something about what you're talking about. And now, over 90% of our commitments are in teams because diverse groups make better decisions than lone geniuses. You know, if you could instantaneously pick the person in this crowd with the highest IQ and you babied them in the nicest suite in the nearest hotel for 2 days, and the rest of us were just locked up here with cold coffee, and you fed 10 questions in to the genius and to us, over 2 days, the rest of us would make better decisions because diverse groups make better decisions. And so that's really what we try to do. We try to create a community in which people are empowered individually because they're working together to solve a common goal. And I think that's what works all over the world. That's what we need in the United States. That's what everybody needs. They need inclusive economics, inclusive societies, and inclusive governance. Governance defined as any decision making that deals with the public good. So it can be in the government or in private business policy or in the non-governmental world, or what I prefer when all three are working together.
Just on a personal note, I yesterday visited YouTube and I met with all the people that work at YouTube, and I was stunned how young they are, how diverse, what a diverse group of people there are. And I think the thing that struck me the most is how many women. I felt like the majority of the people calling the shots there are women, which was absolutely incredible. And YouTube has completely revolutionized my business, and I think for the good. So it's a very powerful thing to see.
And ours too. I mean, you know, it's amazing. You get a few people following around on YouTube, and all of a sudden, somebody comes up to you and tells you what you said.
Yes.
You know, and it doesn't have to be in 8 seconds. I mean, there actually are people if they self-select you and you have something to say, they'll actually read it, digest it, and come back at you, and that's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Twitter too. I think it's very valuable, but I like the idea that a very large swath of young people don't really believe that you can encapsulate a problem and a solution in 8 or 10 seconds. That it's, answering the how question is maybe the biggest challenge of the 21st century. We can all articulate what our problems are. Most of us, and I wish all of us could articulate what our great opportunities are, but figuring out how to seize the opportunities and to minimize the problems, that requires a little more thought and a little more discussion. And the willingness to fail. That's the other thing I was going to say is when we started the CGI program around the United Nations, we encourage people to report when they tried and failed, because we learned a lot from the roughly 6 or 8% of our reporting commitments who said, we tried to do this, we didn't make it, here's why. We've learned a lot from that, and we share that too. When we had the opening panel, the young man who founded Pinterest said this was his third business, and the first two failed and he didn't know why, and this one succeeded and he wasn't sure. He was wonderful in his humility, but over the course of the session, I think everybody here would say they got the feeling that this was a very special person, and he was not easily deterred, even though he wasn't overbearing. And I think that's something we all have to learn.
Now, you've been hearing some ideas while you've been here, some pitches, some concepts. Is there anything that's grabbed your imagination that you've heard, since you've been here?
Oh, a lot. But the thing that I'm always interested in are the things that I think go right at the heart of something we're dealing with. We had last night on our opening panel the founder of Muslim Girls. And Amani was talking about how important it was for Muslim women to be self-confident in America, and just by the power of their example to assert the expectation of equal and fair treatment, the absence of discrimination, and in so doing to empower others to do the same. That's a big deal now with the way a lot of people in public life are talking fast and loose about America's Muslim population, which I think is one of our great strengths, is that we have people here from everywhere, from all kinds of faith traditions, with all kinds of politics. And one of the things that is really important we have to understand is the great battle for the future is not even in ISIS land, although I think that's important. I can't stand the way those people have gone after the Yazidis and all the other minority religions, and the way they've subjected women and girls to sexual abuse and, beheaded people and all that. But most of this battle is taking place on the social media. So to have someone who lives in that space, who's proud of being here, proud of who she is, and proud of her tradition, trying to empower other people, including younger people at more fragile ages, is a big deal. That's just one example. And Salman Khan was here talking about how he built the Khan Academies and how it's turning now into an attempt to basically create a global education culture. And all we have to do is now figure out how to get last mile delivery, which we've been struggling with for some time, driving down the cost of laptops, figuring out how to charge them and recharge them in remote areas and all of that. But he made it sound fun and interesting and acted like he was just a successful geek who stumbled into this trying to help a relative do better in math. I suspect there was more to it than that, but not much. I mean, that's the other thing. We all have to, the thing I liked about his presentation and the people that have made almost spontaneous commitments here out of their own experience is that it's very important to keep your eyes open for what's going on right around you. when I was a little younger man and I left the White House and I wrote my autobiography, my editor had edited some of the great fiction writers of the late 20th century, and he called me, he said, I gave him the first 150 pages, he said, "This is a great story." He said, "How much did you make up?" I said, "No, it all really happened." He said, "You got to be kidding." I said, "No, it really did." He said, "Did you know any sane people when you were growing up?" I said, "Probably not, but neither did anybody else. I just was taught to pay attention." And that's what I like about so many of these young people have these relatively unique commitments because they were paying attention. I suspect most children are paying attention. I suspect your kids are going to do just fine because they were paying attention to you in ways of which you were not aware. And so anytime somebody comes up with a commitment, like this Muslim girl's commitment, or like the Khan Academy, and then tries to make it, you know, the humongous thing it is, and then says, but still not reaching everybody, help me figure out how to reach everybody. I know that's somebody that was paying attention. Just in Simon's case, to a relative and who'd held it with math.
It's interesting because my very next question that I plan to ask is something that you got into, but I'd like to get more specific, which is we are, because of the campaign we're in right now, there is a wave of xenophobia that's being stoked up by certain politicians that are trying to prey on people's fears about the greater world, saying America should withdraw, America shouldn't be involved, we should be careful about who comes in and who doesn't come in. And I'm wondering, as you know, this has happened before in American history. It's something that recurs, but you face the unique struggle, and everyone here faces the unique struggle of creating a global effort. Is it harder? Do you ever worry that it's going to become more difficult to have a global initiative when, right now, maybe in America, some people's fears are being stoked?
Sure, because like when I took office as president, it was a very different time. We had some problems. There was this horrible war in Bosnia. Mm-hmm. We were about a year and a half away, or a little less than a year and a half away from the Rwandan genocide. There was ongoing troubles in the Middle East, but it was ripe then for a long resolution, and we had 7 years of relative peace and quiet there, interrupted by sporadic incidences of violence. But we thought we could put the world together. My predecessor, the first President Bush, said at the end of the Cold War, there should be a new world order. That was a little too rigid, but we did have a chance to create a new world of partnerships and alliances and general understandings. And that created the climate in which all over the world, these non-governmental groups were rising. I remember Hillary was the first person, because she always did a lot of this work, to convince me that when I went to India, when I went to Turkey, when I went to African countries, I should also meet with people like all of these young people, their predecessors, who were trying to end female genital mutilation in African countries and solve all kinds of problems in India and Turkey. But you have to make this work, there has to be a sense of coming together, of the potential of it. And what's happened is a combination of the largest refugee population unleashed out of a variety of places since the end of World War II, the decision of Russia to pursue a more expansionist policy, unease in East Asia because of China and their conflicts, not military so far, with their smaller neighbors, and the resurgence of an aggressive North Korea, and the global economic crisis and its aftermath, which has led to a lot of nationalist feeling and collective insecurity because people have been so long without any economic growth and any prospects. That's fueled a lot of what's going on in Greece, but it also has an impact all across Europe. Europeans have a great history of taking in immigrants, but their generosity is tempered, I think, by their anxieties over their own positions. And that's what led in the UK to the vote in part for the Scottish nationalists to secede, and now the vote for whether Britain should secede from the European Union. That would have been unthinkable. There was a legitimate argument in the UK not to join the euro because they had an independent global financial leadership, but they wanted to be in the European Union. So that's what happens when things begin to fall apart. It's hard, they all feed on each other, the economic, the political, then you stoke these deep psychological fears because you think about it, when all of you think about it, whenever you feel really insecure, where do you feel best? I want to go home, whatever home is. And the psychological home of most people is with people who look like them, think like them, had the same life they had. And it's exactly the wrong response in an interdependent world, because no matter how much you try to stop it, you can't end our interdependence. But I'm not surprised by it. I just think we need to rise above it. And you can't be afraid, because one of the things that happens with interdependence is if you want to claim all the benefits, it's like anything that happens in life. There is no perfect gift. No perfect, you have to accept that there will be some risks. You know, we've been debating in America what to do with the guy's cell phone that was involved in the San Bernardino thing. Should Apple help the FBI? Then the FBI says, okay, you don't have to help us, we figured out a way to get in there anyway.
Right.
You say, oh my God, is my Apple phone secure? I mean, you know, it's all this endless stuff. Look, you are living in an interdependent age, which in ways large and small reflects the ongoing conflict between the forces of positive interdependence and the forces of negative interdependence. Your job, no different than Conan's or mine, is to build up the positive and shrink the negative, and to recognize that you can't create a perfect world, you can only create a better world, and you can make it better every day. And you can't make it better by running away and hiding and pretending that it doesn't exist.
I want to talk about, since it's been clear to everyone that since you left office, the rise in partisanship has become more and more and more extreme. It probably, when you were president, seemed pretty tough, but it has gotten to the point where we're deadlocked on a Supreme Court justice. It can seem almost comical at times to people in my business, but it's really not that funny. And so I'm curious, do you think the president, any president now, has the power to break this kind of deadlock? I think some Americans are starting to feel that this is insurmountable.
I know that they may be right, but I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. I think, again, I think the problem was aggravated by the decision of the Supreme Court in 2000 to decide the presidential race without recounting the votes in Florida. And then there was 9/11. Then we came together for a while. In America and around the world, it's almost impossible to remember. They were waving American flags in Paris and on every continent in solidarity with us after all these people were murdered on 9/11, including more than 200 American Muslims. I'm not talking about the people that were involved in the attack, Americans living here. And so instead of adopting inclusive economics and inclusive politics, we went in the other direction. Although I have to say that the second President Bush, for all of our disagreements, at least was the last major Republican figure to generally favor immigration reform. He was willing to take his chances that he could convince enough new Americans to support him and what he believed in. And it's something he deserves credit for. I mean, he went to a mosque and met with Muslim leaders after 9/11, said, "Our enemy is terror, not your faith." And that was a gift that we could all work with. And so then it just got worse and worse. And you had this Tea Party movement of people who believed the rather extremist anti-government rhetoric. And they said, how about the reality? And then our people got discouraged, a lot of people in my party, and didn't vote in midterms. So the Republicans began to lose presidential elections, but win at midterms the governorships, the state legislators. And they did what politicians always do if there's no balance. They overdid the redistricting so that they wound up with all these members of Congress who were far more worried about a primary challenge than being elected in a general election. So it undermined the center. There could be no dynamic center if you knew you were going to win your seat if you got your nomination. And we began to drift apart. And then a lot of big money, the Citizens United decision, I think, was a very bad decision because basically hung a for sale sign on our democracy. So President Obama was unusually gifted. And after the crash in 2008, you know, he would have been elected. Anybody who had a beating pulse on our ticket would have won that because of what happened, because the Iraq War was unpopular and because the economy was in a tank. But he was able to get reelected because he did a better job than they were giving him credit for and because he had a good campaign. And yet we've made barely a dent in the congressional polarization or the polarization in the states. I think it's now possible that it will change. First, because I believe we are just this close to being able to restore more broadly shared economic growth. There is too much inequality. But we're this close to being able to flip it and start rising together again. And if that happens, and I believe it will, then it will diminish the tensions in our country between people of different religious and racial and ethnic and even political groups. It will make dialogue slowly more possible. It will also help the European economy and our neighbors. We'll do better. And I think then the Congress will have to decide whether they can best hold on to their jobs by making something good happen or just saying no. In the end, look, most people, I don't care how political they are, do not get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and say, oh, goody, I can go spend one more day making sure not one thing happens in the United States and blaming it on the president. I just don't think it just violates human nature, and we've about played that out. It's an old, stale, tired tune. So, yes, I'm pretty optimistic.
I'm going to throw it over to, that's good to hear you're optimistic. Let's give optimism a hand, shall we?
Well, wait a minute. I'm not naive, but if you look at it, this country's been counted out many times. From the time that George Washington was being made fun of for never having won a military battle till the Revolutionary War and having a bad set of false teeth, all the way that Abraham Lincoln was called a baboon right before he took office, and one newspaper in his own home state said we'd be better off if he didn't live to take the oath of office. I mean, a lot of people have counted us out. So far, they have all lost money. Everybody that bet against us has lost money because no matter how foolish we seem and how many crazy mistakes we make, in the end, Churchill's right. The United States winds up doing the right thing after exhausting every other alternative. And I guess what I think is we have exhausted all these bad alternatives, and it may be time for us to get the show on the road. These young people from all over the world may be more emblematic of our future than our immediate past, and we all better hope so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to ask you, I'm not doing my job if I don't ask. You're talking about crazy. In the unlikely event that Donald Trump becomes the president of the United States, in the unlikely event, do you know which country you're moving to? I've picked out Holland, by the way. I love Holland.
Yeah, me too.
Holland's in the house.
Yeah, and the Dutch postcode lottery is one of the biggest supporters of my foundation, so I'm grateful. I think I'll stay and fight on. It's what I've always done.
Good.
But look, you know, I'm a big believer if you're involved in a race, and when I'm not doing this work, I am. You never look past this fight to the next one, otherwise you may not get there. So I think I really hadn't given a lot of thought to that, except in the end, it's likely to give the American people a clear choice about what kind of country we are. And maybe it's high time in the 21st century that we come to terms with the implications of our interdependence, the implications of our diversity, the implications of our potential. What are our obligations and opportunities to our native people, who are still the poorest Americans? What are our obligations and our opportunities to the emerging nations in Africa and Latin America? What about all those poor people from Central America who are coming here because they have the highest murder rates in the world in Guatemala and Honduras, and the highest in El Salvador, and the states aren't strong enough to protect them from the narco-traffickers that are wending their way through Central America into Mexico, and then in the United States. We need to talk about that, and maybe, you know, it won't be a reality TV show. Maybe we'll get a chance to take it beyond 8 seconds to decide who we are, what we believe in, and how we think change best occurs. And, you know, some cynics made fun of my candidate in this race when she said she thought we needed more love and kindness in our politics, not in being tough in our disagreements, that's important, but honest to goodness, it's exhausting. You know, I watched that Republican debate where those three guys literally wouldn't stop talking over each other's voices for 45 seconds, calling each other liars. That's not a good thing. And it's not a nice picture for these young people to see, whether they're from America or around the world. We just need to rise above this. We need to rise. And we better make up our minds that we got to rise together. And I don't think, let me just make one last point about this. So I'm a Democrat. And most people in the,
I see reporters rushing to the phone.
But wait.
He's a Democrat, I tell you.
But I'll give you an example. So most of the people in Appalachia, for cultural reasons, are voting heavily Republican. But our party has an obligation not to stop fighting climate change, but to realize that West Virginia has the second weakest economy in America and the highest rate of prescription drug and heroin abuse. And the two things are not unrelated, because we have never done anything. We're not good in our country historically on transition economics. And it is morally wrong, even when you're saving the planet, to leave somebody behind on the field of battle for whom you have an obligation. And you can go all over this country and find places that have been left out and behind. You can go all over the world. You know, I spend a lot, our foundation works in the area in northern Nigeria, which has been dominated by Boko Haram. And for 50 cents a person, you can keep kids from dying of waterborne diseases, principally diarrhea, but also dysentery and cholera. And we haven't been hurt there, our people. But the unemployment rate there in the predominantly Muslim area, most vulnerable to Boko Haram, is 3 times the unemployment rate in the Lagos area, the most populous part of the country, where we also work. Every country in the world needs to start asking, can we be a nation if we don't have a policy for inclusive economics, for transition economics, for helping people to begin again? You can't just do it with transfer payments, because in the end, people want to be empowered. They want you to come see them because you want to take a trip, not because you've got them on a drip, drip, drip of dependence that lasts. I'm all for helping people in need, but we're still working in Haiti, and we still got about $350 million more worth of commitments of investments there to put people to work and let them create their own future. And we're not good at it. We got to get good at that. And we can't worry about the political parties or the preferences of the people we're trying to help. If they're in our crowd, in our country, or in our neighborhood or in our city, we need to find a way to have inclusive economics. It will moderate the politics more than anything could.
One last quick question from me, and then we're going to throw it open to the floor. But in just a couple of months, President Obama is going to finish his second term. Very few people know what that's like. You've experienced that. What would your advice be to President Obama when he leaves office? Would you tell him, take 6 months, take the phone off the hook, and just sleep? Watch cartoons? I mean, what would you tell him to do? Get involved right away?
Well, first of all, I've supported him, and as I've said repeatedly, I think he's done a better job than he often gets credit for, because it takes 10 years. For 400 years, we have good economic history. For 400 years, it's taken any country that has the kind of severe economic crash we had 10 years to fully recover from. We got our jobs back in 7.5, but not our incomes. That's why I think we're this close now to going through again. But my advice to him now is to follow his heart. But I think that he will feel, as I always have, from the day I left office. One, I think when you're an ex-president, if your successor asks you to do something, without regard to party, if you can do it in good conscience, you ought to do it, because you were given an opportunity few people get. Second, I think if you're like him, if you're young and vigorous, and you have the kind of social conscience, local and global, he does, you want to find a way to put your experience and knowledge and contacts to work, solving some of the problems and seizing some of the opportunities you cared most about when you're in office. How he will do that, I don't know. It's up to him. But I think he will find the most happiness there. You know, it's sort of like he'll get to go back to his roots as a community organizer, except the world can be his community. And I think that I expect him to have a wonderful second act. I expect her, Michelle, to have a wonderful second act. And I can't wait.
Yeah.
And I expect him to be just as proud of his daughters as I am of mine.
Nice. All right, well, we're going to, I think we've entered the part of the program where we throw it open to questions in the audience. To prepare for that, please welcome back to the stage Vice Chair of the Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton.
That's so we'll have someone who knows the answer.
Good to see you. Yeah, no problem.
That was such a nice, unexpected introduction. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
Oh, I hope that my children feel the same way about me someday that I feel about my parents.
How are you?
I'm great.
I have just a quick memory of being at the White House once for an outdoor event, and you drifted by, and I just said, what is it like to live in the White House as a kid? And you said, sometimes they have these big state dinners, and I'm supposed to do my homework, and I just sit at the top of the stairs and listen to what's going on and wish they'd keep it down. And I was like, that's such a great perspective on a really nice, normal kid living in the White House. I think we are going to move it to questions now, and we should start over here.
Hi, my name is Allie McNamara, and I'm from Illinois College. And my question is, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self that many of us in the audience could also use at this point in our lives?
Chelsea and Conan can easily remember what it was like to be 20. But I do remember. My only advice is that, and I don't see this sadly, it doesn't take long to live a life. And the fuller it is, the faster it goes. So all of you are part of a relatively recent phenomenon in human history. You can choose what to do with your waking hours. Most of the people who have ever lived before just a couple of hundred years ago never had that choice. That's why you're here, because you're making unique choices. And never disempower yourself. That's my advice. Follow your heart as well as your head, and don't disempower yourself. Don't give up. Failure's not a crime. The failure to try, however, is. And
My message would be about skincare. It ruined my social life. Avoid oily foods. That's all I've got.
You're Irish. You got to be careful with your skin.
I know, I'm Irish. 5 minutes in the sun and I look drunk.
So sunscreen too is probably
Lots of sunscreen.
Lots of sunscreen.
Yeah, when I go to the beach, I look like an old woman. Giant hat. How about you? Do you have advice for your younger self?
I think I'd like to echo something that my dad said earlier, and something that we talked a little bit about in the afternoon plenary, which is to always be open to possibilities, to never lose curiosity and the humility to be curious and to be inspired to do something unexpected, unanticipated, unforeseen. I think it is important to have a plan, but I also think it's important to have the comfort to deviate from that plan if something more compelling, an opportunity, a partnership, sometimes even a person comes along that was not in the plan.
All right. Next question, yes.
Hello, my name is Latoya Gonzalez, and I'm a student from Miami-Dade College. And my question is, if you all were back in college, sitting in one of these seats, what would be your commitment to action?
Great question.
That's a good question.
I think I would do, I would have two, if you'll give me two.
You can have, he can have two.
Yeah.
Can he? He can have two.
First of all, I would, particularly if I were in Miami, I would have a commitment that would accelerate as dramatically as I possibly could the deployment of renewable energy in my neighborhood, in my college, and everywhere else, you know. And if I were in Miami, I'd also be trying to support whatever resilience initiatives there were, because Florida is perhaps the most vulnerable place in the country to rising sea levels first. The second thing I would do, if I were my younger self and I lived in a wonderful, diverse environment, and I once gave a commencement to just one of the many commencement ceremonies that your university has, and everybody came in carrying the flag of their country of origin. It was stunning. I would organize people in groups that would commit to meet together for a year and be honest about the things that they felt about people of different cultures and faiths, and not be afraid to say, and I'd make them talk about not how they feel when they're their better selves, but when they wake up in the morning without enough sleep, halfway angry, feeling the world's going to pieces, what their darker self is. I would get people to become people to each other. You know, in Central Africa, where I started a lot of our health work, and where we work still with over 100,000 small farmers, when people meet each other, and they're all walking, nobody's got any mobile transportation, and someone says, hello, how are you, good morning, the response translated into English is not, I'm fine, how are you? It is, I see you. And you ought to try it just as an exercise. When you walk out of this room, look for all the people in uniforms that are working for this great school, that are doing things that make this meeting possible, that have thousands of people walk by them every day, and never once look at them, never see them, never know they're there. And those are the two things I would do, because I think if you saw everybody, you would think of more good things to do with your lives than I could imagine.
I completely agree. I mean, when you asked that question, I kind of went in my mind back to when I was in school, and not kind of to what I would do today, but I think the answer is similar. When I was in college, I discovered, although that's a terrible word, but I kind of stumbled upon Paul Farmer, whom I know many of you now know, but 20 years ago was not particularly well known. And he became kind of one of my galvanizing role models in life. And today is someone I'm really grateful to have the chance to work alongside through some of the work that my father mentioned. And I'm proud, in total disclosure, to be on the board of Partners in Health with him, and that he serves on our Health Access Board at the Clinton Foundation. One of the things that he and I first talked about 20 years ago almost, and continue to talk about today, is the absence of real health literacy here in the United States, and the challenge of helping translate kind of what the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control, kind of puts out as alerts about Ebola or Zika into real information that empowers people and does not translate into fear and stigma and isolationism. And so I think my commitment to action, if I were kind of thinking about myself, almost 20 years ago when I was at Stanford as a freshman, would be how to try to solve that challenge, not only on my campus, but in my community of Palo Alto and East Palo Alto at the time, and more broadly around the AIDS crisis. And today is something that kind of he and I are trying to figure out with others. How do we kind of prevent the widespread panic that happened in this country around Ebola? And for people who do feel drawn to and inspired, tell people if they really want to engage, they should be supporting people like Dr. Berry and the Well Body Alliance. And to do the same now around Zika. And I think that would be my commitment in action. How to translate what the CDC does so well to people who are already kind of always paying attention, to everyone who sometimes pays attention, so that we're inspired and empowered to do kind of the right things in solidarity with one another while still protecting our health, and to prevent and hopefully eliminate the risk of stigma and isolationism that too often comes instead.
Mr. Conan O'Brien, I originally came across CGI by watching your show. Through your talents and unique humor, you have acquired a considerable following stemming from today's youth. How do you act on and take advantage of this platform to influence tomorrow's leaders and raise awareness on the critical issues of today and tomorrow, such as those dealt with here at CGIU?
The fact that I'm up here with these two and you're asking me a question is incredibly flattering. Thank you very much. I mentioned YouTube earlier. I started in 1993, back in the old days when there were 3 networks. Now we live in a world of YouTube, and what has been stunning to me is that my work is now in parts of the country and seen by young people that I didn't even know they had access to what I was doing. So I had an experience 6 weeks ago. I was getting a lot of mail from Seoul, Korea, and South Korea, and I didn't, just one, that's great. I didn't understand why I was getting these gifts from Seoul, South Korea. I didn't understand because I checked and they said, you're not on there. And of course, I'm stuck in the old way of thinking. I decided to go visit South Korea. I got on a commercial flight. I took a camera crew with me. We arrived at the airport. The footage is on YouTube. I get there and there's 2,000 screaming men and women screaming, and flashbulbs and pushing and shoving, and they've got signs and they're crying. And they're so, in a good way, crying, not in America they cry in a bad way when they say, but they, and I'm very honored by that. I think by nature I'm a humble person, but I very much believe in almost a quasi kind of diplomacy that you can do. My humor is I often make fun of myself. When I went to Cuba a year ago, when I went to Armenia, when I went with the First Lady, Michelle Obama, to Qatar Air Force Base, when I just went to Korea, I try to be the silly American who's trying to learn their ways. and I try to humble myself. And so often my greatest joy is someone who doesn't even speak my language laughing at me because I can't eat their food, I'm butchering the language, I'm doing the best I can. I think America has an image in this world of being, maybe we're arrogant. Sometimes people see us as only caring about ourselves and having a solipsistic worldview, and it's just all about us. When I go to these places, I like to show them an American who is happy to be laughed at, is happy to humble himself and be silly. And I think in a way, that is how possibly, in some tiny, tiny way, I can contribute. Everywhere I go, people from different countries, because I've started playing video games, and that has gone viral across all these different countries. In the Netherlands, people come up to me who don't even speak English, and they start hugging me. And it's creepy. No, but it's really nice. It's really nice. And I try to let them know that the person they saw on that video in their home country is really that person. And I'll give them the time that they need. And so it's a small way, but I'm trying to spread that concept of what Americans can be like, which is, I'm humble about it, very humble about it. Yes, who's next? I think I have to go with the microphone, yes. I don't want to exclude anyone. I want to make sure I do this the right way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amelia Colban. I'm a student at Columbia University, and I'm working on a on a team called Flip National. Thank you all for creating this space. As a founding member of Flip National, I'm proud to work on a team committed to promoting first-generation and low-income student communities. This weekend, I'm even prouder to be a member of this incredible generation of leaders. To have the space, support, and resources necessary to develop commitments like these we're discussing here is an astounding privilege. However, to invest time in volunteering and social entrepreneurship can be an inaccessible luxury for many under-resourced and underrepresented students. How can low-income students find the same freedom to prioritize global development as do our socioeconomically better represented peers?
Well, first, let's start here and then go down to the campus level. One of the things we try to do, as I said to Conan in our opening segment, is make sure we pay the way of people to come here, or we raise the money to do it, who have no resources, both in America and from other countries. And secondly, this is your first year we've actually raised $1 million to help people actually fund their ideas. And I hope we can keep raising more and more and more money for it, because I think it's important that even people who don't have the ability to raise any money for themselves, if they have a good idea, have a chance to implement it. Secondly, to have the resources, you have to have the time. And I personally think it is important that we take aggressive steps to make sure that people who come to our country, at least, and pursue education can know from the beginning to the end that they can finish school without unbearable debt, and that what debt they have will be easily manageable as a small percentage of their after-tax income, whatever they do. Then when they're in college, even if they have to work, let's say, 10 hours a week and study, if they want to do this bad enough, they'll find a way to do it. And I think those are the two answers that, to me, are important. Give people the tools they need, even if they don't have the money. And first, give them the time they need by alleviating at least the worst aspects of financial insecurity.
And I would just add to what my dad said by drawing on what came up so persistently and consistently in the afternoon plenary session, where it was, whether it was Dr. Berry or Pramal or Katie talking about their work, that it is important to engage those who you're trying to empower in the solution. So I would say too, if there's more that you think we should be doing at CGIU, please tell us, right? From your experience of your commitment and from the people that you're working alongside. The only way we will continue to have more of a democratized, egalitarian, representative community of people who feel called to this work is if the community continues to tell us and we continue to listen and respond to kind of how best to solve that, at least here at CGIU. So I hope that you'll share what you're learning is working and also not working, so that we can be more effective to ensure that our community here looks like the world of people who feel drawn to this work across the globe.
If I could just say one other thing. I think a lot of people who have economic or other handicaps to overcome should also just pay attention and maybe say, I wish I could spend 20 hours a week on this, but I can't. But get yourself in a position where you're empowered to the point where you can exercise the ability to help other people and advance whatever causes you want at the soonest possible point. I mentioned this in the opening night, and I don't want to embarrass her. But sitting over here on the front row is a young woman who graduated from Harvard Law School without the ability to see or hear. She speaks perfect English. Oh, wait. She speaks perfect English. I have no idea how she learned how to do that. With the capacity of the technology of both a friend and aide who's typing in what I'm saying that goes to her through a machine which translates it into Braille. So the next time you think life is tough, she got out of Harvard, and you know what she's doing? She is an advocate for opportunities for people with disabilities because, in fact, they have enormous ability, and all over the world, that ability is going untapped, diminishing their lives and the rest of ours as well. So let's give it a big hand. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up.
Hi, I'm Navika Shukla from Chicago, and my question is, social issues are so complex and intertwined with one another that oftentimes well-intentioned interventions end up creating more problems than they solve. How can young people ensure that the work they do addresses true issues and is not disruptive to the traditions of a community?
I think again, this came up on our panel earlier, which was about unintended consequences and how to design to be conscious of them and respond to kind of unintended and unexpected consequences when they arise. And I think the answer in some ways is just a continuation or amplification of the answers we gave to the last question, in that if from the beginning you are kind of engaged with, talking with, designing with, and hopefully, if able, employing alongside you people who are from the community you're trying to empower or kind of engage in a social change, then I think you'll be focused on what are the real barriers, and focused on the real barriers kind of in the right priority. And so I hope that helps answer your question. I think that's true really with any challenge in life. There's a new study that came out that was covered in at least both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal this week, and I know you're going to laugh, but try not to, about the history of the development of sanitary products in the United States, tampons and sanitary pads. I'm very impressed none of you laughed, because clearly this has been an important part of empowering women over our lives and being able to make the right choices for ourselves in school and professionally in sports and in other areas. And perhaps not surprisingly, although fewer than 10% of the patents for sanitary pads and tampon products are held by women, the products that have been designed and patented by women are far more successful in the marketplace. So I say that because that seems so obvious, but clearly to consumer product companies for generations, at least here in the United States, although I doubt it's different in other parts of the world, that was not so obvious. So I think engaging with and empowering the people that ultimately you're trying to empower or support or change the circumstances of from the beginning, whether it's in a social venture effort or kind of the government or business or otherwise, clearly is more likely to succeed. So hopefully that helps answer your question. And again, I'm just super proud of all of us that when I said don't laugh, no one did. You should laugh at Conan, though, all the time.
Let me just say this. I think that's a really important question. I think it is becoming increasingly less prevalent among donors, but a lot of governments, including ours, have made a lot of mistakes over the years by deciding in advance what people need, and then doing it, and figuring out how best to do it, and doing it, and saying, we're putting up the money, we're going to do this. And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You have to not patronize people you're trying to help, and you have to realize the help you're really trying to give them is empowerment. And you have to be willing to listen and change course. And I'll give you two very quick examples. A friend of mine who has been very active in our foundation is Canadian, and he had this idea because if Peru has all kinds of minerals and wonderful things, and there's lots of mining down there, and a lot of it done by foreign countries have been incredibly controversial. So the Canadian mining companies, which had the best reputation, wanted to see if they could put up some money with their allies to basically redo the economy there so that the countries would be better off when the mines played out than when they were running. Laudable goal. So the then president of Peru welcomed us down there, and we were designing it, and he said, but wait, first I have an emergency. I said, and I knew him, and I said, what is it? He said, we have the highest cataract rate among working age people in the world because of our altitude, our atmosphere, the sun, other things, diet, you name it. And I've got enough money now to keep up with the cataract rates, but I've got a 50,000 backlog. Before you do anything else, would you please get cataract surgeries for 50,000 people? We didn't have a clue, but I knew one thing. If we wanted a mining project to work, we better do the cataract. So we found all these partners, and we did more than 50,000. We did it in less than the allotted time, $2 million under budget. And guess what? When we started empowering Indian women, Incans, to go into remote villages to distribute consumer products for the first time ever, it worked a lot better because everybody knew we cared about the people because of the 50,000 cataracts. The other example is, and one of my favorite entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs is here, George Soror, who started this project in Uganda to build schools, Building Tomorrow academies. Uganda has the second largest average family size in the world, a rapidly growing population. They're never going to have enough schools. So George found out he went there as a student. He found out it was costing $200,000 for the government to build the schools and the living facilities for the teachers and give the women teachers any kind of privacy. So he said, I'll do a different model. We'll go in and let the villages design their own schools. We'll design them in a way that will maximize airflow and cool, and we'll do it for $50,000 if you will spend the rest of the money giving more money to the teachers, more money for learning materials, more money for decent conditions so we can get more women teachers out there. And he's doing it, and he's keeping on it. And he did it because even more than their own government, he let the local village people design their schools so they all think they're going to be getting architectural prizes. And if you'd been in the schools, you'd want to give it to them too. So that's my advice. Just don't patronize people. Realize you're there to empower them. And don't be afraid to be guided by what they want. and you'll have fewer unintended consequences. There are always some.
I feel like this woman has, been.
Yeah, here, sure.
Hi, my name is Hannah Kim from George Washington University. My question was, how should you react to people that believe that some social problems are not really issues, so like mental health and climate change?
Well, were you at the panel on mental health?
I was not, unfortunately, this morning.
In our country, it is one of the most, and I think this is true throughout the world, but in the United States, it's one of the most under-resourced challenges we have. But I will say this, there is a general movement, and of course, and Conan asked about the bipartisan polarization. One of the most hopeful things that's happened, there's no money behind it yet, but there will. The United States Senate voted 94-1 about 10 days ago to treat the heroin and prescription drug epidemic that is sweeping across America as a public health problem, not a crime problem, and to deal with it, not just with more treatment, but with serious mental health commitments. Now, we got to get the money to back it up, but it's the beginning. And, you know, in the healthcare law, and even when I was president, we passed a law called mental health parity. But it's one thing to require it and another thing to figure out the infrastructure to deliver it. I have the feeling that we are now on the forefront of doing that. And in a lot of the natural disaster areas that I've worked in the last decade or so, in the aftermath of the tsunami, in the aftermath of Haiti, we finally began to have people realize, and in Katrina, in the Gulf Coast, that we really needed serious mental health supports in the aftermath. So I think the world is waking up to this. It's going to require a lot more trained people, a lot more resources, and a lot more integration into healthcare, so we stop dividing in our own minds physical and mental health and realize it's a continuum. But I think we're getting there, and this is one space, since you're sort of present at the creation of taking this to scale everywhere, where the NGO movement and all of you could have a profound impact everywhere. Look at where I'll give you another example. Look at all the minority religions that are caught up in the Middle East. I recommend a great book called Heirs to Forgotten Kingdoms, which is written by a career British diplomat who's fluent in Arabic and Farsi, about all the little-known religions in the Middle East who are at risk of extinction now in wars involving larger blocs, and what can be done. A lot of them have been saved, but they're very traumatized. A lot of people, if you got the largest refugee population since World War II, I predict there is a far higher percentage of them suffering from serious mental health problems than itching to go blow somebody up with a bomb. So you have lots of opportunities out there, if you care about this, to show how the money can best be spent and to prove that it can make a real difference.
And I just want to add a couple things to that. If you look at the data around the world, kind of mental health is one of the most stigmatized areas still, almost universally, unfortunately. Climate change is almost a particular issue to the United States. We seem to be the only country in the world that still has some resistance at a national level to believing that climate change is real and global warming is happening, and therefore we need an urgent response. So I say that just as a bit of context. I want to add two things to what my dad said. One, I think that on mental health, this is partly why the examples he gave is so important, because if there are actual services, and if those services are provided whether by kind of the government or government aid agencies or NGOs, I know Partners in Health, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, the Mercy Corps, the International Medical Corps, I mean, a number of organizations that are engaged in crisis situations are trying to really ramp up their mental health services. They're actively recruiting psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, social workers, yes, to be able to complement the medical staffs that historically they've deployed, because they recognize that they have a real responsibility to their own Hippocratic oaths to be able to provide the types of counseling and recovery and post-traumatic stress services to the people that they're treating for injuries or tuberculosis or the aftermath of gender-based violence. So I think we're moving in that direction, but anything kind of that we can do to support that from a awareness standpoint, from a funding standpoint, I think we should do, because I think when services are present, that's an important part of eliminating the stigma and shifting the perception. The second thing I would say is clearly young people have demonstrated how powerful we collectively are in this country, in the almost revolutionary shift in less than 20 years in the views around equal marriage. And so I bring that up because we have clearly exerted profound influence over our grandparents and our parents' perceptions of what is first acceptable, at least on this basis. Some of you are laughing, and true. Thank you, Dad. Exhibit A, and to a normative sense. And if we look at the climate change kind of polling here in the United States, middle school kids are even more aware of the realities of climate change than college-age students are, who are even more aware than kind of people in their 30s and 40s, and even more aware than people in their 50s and 60s. So just talking about and not taking for granted that people know things that you know, kind of elevating the voice of people who are even younger than you are to be advocates to their parents, to their grandparents, to their communities about the challenges, but also the opportunities of climate change, I think is not to be underestimated, because we've seen the real impact of those personal conversations and dialogues in families and communities and real social change, even in our lifetime, and some of us clearly have been part of that in a positive sense.
All right. We've come to the conclusion, I'm getting the signal that we have no more time for the question section of this program. I want to personally thank everyone for letting me crash this party, having me here at the Clinton Global Initiative University at UC Berkeley. This was fun.